have an accent? I didn't know.
So pleased to have them with us, ladies and gentlemen, Sandler and Young.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Sandler and Ralph Young.
Just to travel along, sing a song, side by side.
Yeah, I'll tell you something, Sandler and Young.
When love comes in and takes you for a spin. Ooh, la, la,
The Tony Sandler Podcast, the story of the amazing career from the man himself.
It was a very good year.
And now, Tony Sandler.
Estoy muriendo de...
Please welcome Mr. Tony Sandler.
How do you feel about swinging down memory lane one more time?
I will do my best, my very best, to entertain.
I first saw Tony Sandler perform on New Year's Eve, 1997.
Symphonie, symphonie d'amour, symphonie d'amour dans mon cœur lourd.
I was absolutely awestruck. He was so continental, so alluring. His voice, his music, the authenticity, his stage presence, his good looks.
No arms can ever hold you like these arms of mine.
Several months later, I had, quite by chance, the good fortune to work with Tony. He was televising a show.
L'important, c'est la rose, l'important, c'est la rose, it's the rose. That's important, c'est la rose.
I was useful. Script writing, production, design, stage direction, sound mixing, music arrangements, copywriting, and de facto biographer. And I worked with Tony ever since that time. My name is Marna Peterson, and I am talking with Tony Sandler, the continental half of that fabulous singing duo so famous in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, Sandler and Young. Welcome, Tony.
Boy, is that's worth it. That's fantastic. Well, Marna, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, Tony, you look great.
My doctor last week, I asked him, how am I doing? He said, you're going to live to be 85. I said, Doc, I am 85. He said, see? What did I tell you? And there's, have you ever heard this story about the oldest man on earth was asked how he managed to get over 100 years old. And he said, well, I stayed away from women until I was 12.
Very good.
So, Marna, what are we going to talk about?
Well, Tony, you've had 60 of those 85 years were spent singing on stage, performing, entertaining people. And so I think we have an awful lot to talk about.
Yeah, I was over 4 continents. Can you imagine?
That's a lot. That's a lot. And your rose to fame actually about 3 times during that time.
All right. Well, I had a career in Europe. I started when I was 18, and I was doing quite well until the point that the allure of America happened, and I had a chance to go to Vegas, which we can talk about.
Well, let's go back just a hair. You were actually a big pop star in Europe, and that was in the 1950s. And you were a film star. And you were a heartthrob, I might add.
Oh, my God.
in Belgium.
What are we going to do?
Oh, you were in Belgium, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, England, Scandinavia, Austria, Italy. I think the Americans found you in Italy, didn't they?
That's exact. Well, I started recording my first song. It was a Flemish song when I was 18. And to my surprise, it was played all over the radio down there. So I became some kind of an entity there at 18. Then, quickly, a big company by the name of Polydor knocked on my door, and I recorded, close to 100 titles with them. And then the biggie was Ariola in Germany, a man by the name of Werner Mertin. found me, and I was recording in Berlin. From there, I was working all over Western Europe, actually, and finally wound up in Italy on the beautiful Italian Riviera.
Exactly. And what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to go back and cover all of those early years in Europe.
Will?
Yeah.
Wow.
And what I want to do, because you have a lot of stories to tell there, it's very fun. You also lived through World War II. Belgium was occupied. You have a lot of stories there.
The dark spot there, Marna, because I was 7 when the Germans invaded Belgium. You know, in 17 days, it was a blitzkrieg. They took Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg, and much of France when I was 7 years old, and we lived under the German occupation for 5 years.
Yeah, and you have fascinating stories there that we're certainly going to come back to.
Yep.
Now, what I want to do, though, is move on to you rose to fame in Europe, and then you rose to fame again in the United States with Sandler and Young. How did you ever run into the Americans?
Well, I was, like I just told you, I was performing on the Italian Riviera in Alassio, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, in a place called Café Roma. Café Roma was a gorgeous setting, actually, on top of a roof of a big building, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, built-in amphitheater. So the stage was right there, and then the people all around. Sat about 650 people, and because of my linguistic ability, probably, I was the favorite there because there were like 12 nationalities vacationing on the Italian Riviera.
And those were the well-heeled. The Italian Riviera was quite popular at that time.
That was top of the line. Yeah. Because in front of Café Roma were Maseratis and all kinds of fancy Italian cars.
Well, and we are going to also touch on the languages that you speak. You speak 5 languages, is that correct? Fluently.
Well, see, the blessing here, Marna, is kind of simple. When you're born in Western Europe, especially in Flanders, where I was born, we start off being bilingual. Belgium is bilingual, Flemish or Netherlands, and French. Mm-hmm. So you start with 2. Flemish is a Germanic language, so it's an easy step to go to German. Mm-hmm. Because of my Greco-Latino studies that I did for 6 years in my life.
Well, you studied Latin and ancient Greek, as I recall, in school. Yeah. So you know the derivation of an awful lot of words.
I still remember my old Greek alphabet.
Good.
Which, by the way, all those, when you say alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, a lot of those words are used in the American language today.
Well, what I also have noticed that what you do is you talk about the derivation of words because you can break them down into their early
Well, I often told you
Greek
and the similarities.
Latin
So English, actually, a derivative of the Germanic and Latin base. Mm-hmm. The English was for me the easiest of all. German is a complicated language. Mm-hmm. French is a complicated language. The Italians, vanno fandare.
A fun language.
Yes, but like I said, the blessing here and my fortune was that I was born where I was born. It's a lot tougher for Americans, for example, to learn languages. Why? Well, the majority of the people speak English, so they never hear another language. They have no really desire to, maybe now with the Spanish influence and all that. But, you know, it was a natural for me, and I probably had the talent to do it.
And the ear. I believe it takes an ear, too.
I recorded in 6 languages, Marna. Mm-hmm. 6 languages. Spanish for me is the rustiest. I understand it. Mm-hmm. But I never dug into the Spanish language, although I recorded quite a few Spanish songs.
Ya no estás más a mi lado, corazón. En el alma solo tengo soledad. Y si yo no puedo verte, porque Dios me hizo quererte para hacerme sufrir más. Siempre fuiste la razón de mi existir. Adorarte para mí fue religión. Y en tus besos yo encontraba el calor que me brindaba el amor y la pasión.
So I'm at Cafe Roma, like I described there, and I was doing very well. An agent came to me and said, there's a guy that's in Milan, and he's looking for a singer for his big extravaganza called the Casino de Paris to go to the dunes in Las Vegas. So, would you be interested? I said, well, I'm really busy here, as you know. I had contracts all over the place. I still had a film contract pending and stuff like that. I had made 4 films at the time, or was in 4 films. And and then I had a contract with Ariola, the big record company. So this guy said, yeah, well, would you meet Mr. Apgar, Fred Apgar, was the guy that put the Casino de Paris, that extravaganza, put that together. And would you meet with him in Milan? I said, well, I perform every night here at Cafe Roma. Could you be in Milan tomorrow at 10 and meet this man? So I had a guy, a friend of mine, that had he didn't have a Maserati. It was an Alfa Romeo. Brodo was his name.
Yes.
Good friend. And he said, I'll get you there. So after the show, we got in his car, and then he had to drive over quite a few mountains to get to Milan, because they didn't have the Autobahn or the La Strada.
No, those were still old highways at that time.
Autostrada,
That's
they're
right.
solely like the Italians call it. They didn't have that yet.
We're winding through the narrow roads.
And I got to Milan, where I met Fred Apgar. Fred was sitting behind his desk, and I walked in, and I had brought tapes and all kinds of stuff to prove what I had done so far.
Sure.
Wanted to impress him. Anyhow, this guy sat behind his desk. He said, how tall are you? I said, how tall am I? I said, I'm 1 meter, 87 centimeters, which translates, folks, into 6'2". And he said, you want to go to Vegas? You're hired. I said, what? Yeah, he said, he wanted me to sign a contract for 3 months, which I did on the spot. I had called my wife. I said, here's this crazy guy. He wants us to go to Vegas. Let's do it. So never knew exactly what I was getting into with the Casino de Paris show, because it was a girly show, of course. Never knew what my role was going to be for 3 months. Can you imagine they had me play Napoleon in that show? Have you ever seen a Napoleon 6'2"? You know, I had to put on those long socks and do all that stuff. And Ralph was my general, standing next to me. And every night he would look up to me and smirk at me. I sat there like Napoleon. Crazy stuff. But anyhow, I didn't know what I was going into.
But I think the allure of America at that time was very strong for most Europeans. The America that they saw in the movies was so glamorous, so happy, so upbeat. Everything was clean and new.
Yeah, but exactly. That was the lure. The lure was enormous, and I said, well, why shouldn't I go to Vegas for 3 months?
Well, plus that was a time when Vegas was just coming into its own.
You know how big Vegas was at the time?
No.
There were 50,000 people living in Las Vegas in 1963. 50,000. There were 8 hotels, starting with the Flamingo. No, you had the Tropicana, the Flamingo, the Dunes, the Desert Inn, the Sands, the Thunderbird, and the Sahara hotels. And that was it. So we landed at the Casino de Paris troupe landed at the Dunes.
There were about 100 in that cast. That was all European cast, as I recall, other than...
And also the rehearsal for that show all happened in Milan, by the way, between September and October before we took off. Then we flew with a chartered plane, that whole group, in November, flew over Montreal on to Las Vegas. Now, sad thing happened when we landed in Montreal. I don't know exactly if people remember that. There was a plane crash in Montreal, like 20 miles. The plane took off in Montreal for Toronto and crashed. There was 118 people.
I think it was icing or snowing,
but
something
anyhow,
like that.
We land in Montreal, we get off the plane to go to the next gate to take that other charter to Vegas. And here is this, out of all those people that we walked through to get to the other gate, just sobbing and crying. They had just learned of the tragedy.
Yeah.
That was
so
terrible.
sad.
That was also, I don't know if you remember that, Marna, that was a week after President Kennedy was killed.
That's right. That was 1963.
Exactly. So we knew in Milan what had happened. There was a lot of sadness, I remember, amongst the Italians that this man, our president, was killed.
Yeah, yeah. As
So-
there was in this country,
so
too.
we actually took that charter to Vegas in a somber mood, I remember. You know, that ebullience and that excitement that the troupe had to fly into Vegas and do that show.
Right.
It was kind of crazy. So,
It was a very mixed emotions evolved.
but now here we land in Vegas at 3 in the morning. We land in a cold desert, November. Cold, chilly. We got to our assigned rooms and all that stuff. But this show that I signed for 3 months, after 2 weeks, was such a huge hit that Apgar came to me and wanted to sign me for a year. Now, I had all those obligations. I had a family. I had 2 small kids that were still in Belgium.
I'm sure you hadn't planned on this at all. It was totally an interim kind of thing.
Of course not. And so I had to debate that. And after a couple of weeks, I had a little time to sign. Ralph Young, whom I had met because he was, we were both in that show, actually convinced me. And even Apgar came to me. He said, Tony, I mean, can't you postpone some other stuff in Europe? This is a great show. You're doing great in the show. Can you just, you can always go back after a year and say, hey, I spent a year in Vegas.
Yeah.
I said, so they convinced me. And I could postpone stuff. But I also remember that the owner of the Café Roma flew into Vegas twice to get me back.
To get you back, yeah. Plus, you had to break some serious contracts
there. It was a serious
there.
attraction for him, but here we are. The show is a big hit. Ralph and I are in it.
But that was with Lynn Renaud.
Lynn Renaud was the female star, and we flanked her. But it was so stupid for me, so different from being a solo performer always, all my life, depending on my craft only, and people paying attention to me. All of a sudden, I'm surrounded by...
No, that show was...
girls.
That show was...
But they didn't pay any attention to me. Of course. There were 3 girly shows on the strip at that time. At the Tropicana, there was the Folie Bergère.
That was already there, right?
Later, we connected with that. There was the Dunes with the Casino de Paris, and there was the Lido at the Circus Hotel.
But none of them had the class of this show.
They weren't as powerful, I think so, yeah.
And it was more than just the dancers. I mean, the costuming that went into that was just extraordinary.
It was phenomenal. Actually, Apgar did a fantastic job how he put it all together. But
you had some top.
The reason here is what you asked originally, Sandler and Young. How did we get together? Because of our size. Because I was 6'2" and Ralph was 6'1", which is totally crazy when you think about it.
It's crazy. But you would not have been hired had you not had the talent.
Well, here is the thing. See, with Ralph and me, at first when we started, people thought we came from under a rock or something. But we did not come from under a rock. I had extensive experience in film, in recording, and in performing. Ralph Young was the king of the production singers.
Yeah, explain what that is, Tony.
A production singer is a guy that walks on stage surrounded by girls and sings a song. That's a production singer. He doesn't even have to be a dancer. Ralph had worked a lot in New York at the Latin Quarter, it was called, was owned by Lou Walters, who was Barbara Walters' father.
Okay.
Later on, she became very important, actually, when Sandler and Young were flying high already. She had us, and Hugh Downs. That there were 2. They had the morning show from 7 to 9.
Was that the Today Show?
That was on NBC, I think, that they had the Today Show. It was a news show. At one time, they gave us 31 minutes.
That's astounding.
Of performing.
Wow. That is.
And when we walked out of there, out of the studio, the lights were flashing all over the place on the girls that picked up
the switchboards.
On the switchboard. It was and they had never seen anything like it. They said they had a response from over the United States, I guess.
Wow.
They put, Barbara and Hugh Downs put us on for 31 minutes in little segments. We had to be there at 4 a.m. to prepare before 7 o'clock, set the cameras, you know what it is, get the sound right and all that stuff.
We're going to spend a lot more time on Sandler and Young.
People are going to get tired of hearing these stories, Marla.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't
good.
think so, Tony. They're I never get tired of hearing. But you did have a full career then after Sandler and Young also. Just want to alert people that we're going to be talking about that too.
There was a distinct age difference between Ralph and me. Ralph was 16 years older than me.
I think a lot of people don't know that.
Which was not obvious when we were working as Sandler and Young, but he was. He must have looked younger, and I must have looked older, because it's one or the other. But Ralph, after the 20 years that we performed together, got tired.
Yeah.
It was so extensive, it was so intensive. The traveling,
the schedule,
we sometimes worked 50 weeks a year. I mean, we'll talk about it as we go along.
It's tough for anyone, but it's.
But so Ralph retired at 65, but I was only 49 then.
And you were very much at the top of your game then. And,
proof is that I recorded, after that, I recorded over 200 songs by myself afterwards.
Wow. Yeah. And you toured the country extensively.
Oh, I toured for Cami, the community concerts. That was a great venue. Instead of the people having to go to New York to see a show or Chicago or wherever, we went to the people.
And then
we went to the small community.
The hinterlands, yes. Plus all the tours on the high seas between London and New York.
That was fun. I mean, they treated us like royalty.
Really, to wrap up his 60-year career, what Tony is working on now, and I'm working with him on this, is his Legacy series, the Tony Sandler Legacy series.
Well, I figured out, Marla, that I wound up with a treasure trove here of tapes, 2-inch, 1-inch, Betamaxes, recordings, reel to reel. I mean, you name it. And I said, if I don't do anything with this, it's all going to go. It's going to get lost, or it's, And I started thinking about it, and I said, I got to digitize everything, preserve it all. And because of that, there's now a lot of interest, like, for example, in the Sandler and Young 1-hour specials, or the recordings, the 10 CDs that we made with Capitol Records, which was a fantastic experience for me, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and we're issuing those as a collection. We're going to put in all of the liner notes that were on those original Capitol albums, which are so fun to read.
We were at the Capitol Studios in L.A., and that was the top of the line.
Oh, yeah.
Nat King Cole had just died the year before. Nat was part of...
Before you had your contract with...
King Cole, you had Nancy Wilson, you had... what was his name?
Lou Rawls, I think, was one of those.
Lou Rawls, great singer, yeah. And then us, Sandler and Young. And I still remember King Cole had died in 60... I think it was 65. And his wife, the mother of Natalie Cole, who became a star also, came often to the studio when we did our recording, Sandler and Young.
During the recording
sessions? What we did. I loved that woman. She was just a terrific gal.
Wow.
And Nat, of course, much too young, one of the greatest guys, and he was so popular.
Fabulous musician.
Do you remember his trio, the King Cole trio? That was just the
wonderful
the summum
musicians.
of accompaniment. I mean, you cannot do any better.
Yeah. So, what we're going to do is talk about a lot of these stories. Tony, you've met a lot of people along the way: the rich, the famous, the infamous. You were in show business, an insider at the tail end of the golden age. Let's go back to Sandler and Young.
Who are they?
We stroll the lane together, laughed at the rain together,
as I signed for a year. And I hated what I was doing there in Casino Prix. I'm sorry to say, folks, but that was not me anymore.
Well, because you were so used to being a solo performer.
Yeah. But I could return to Europe then and say, hey, I was in Vegas for a year.
Right.
But anyhow, I recognized, after getting to know Ralph Young, my partner, that this man had a gorgeous voice. He was a bass baritone, solid. He had been the band singer for Les Brown.
Les Brown, right.
With Doris Day at the time. This guy goes back.
But he was with Shep Fields, wasn't he?
And with Shep Fields also, yeah. Shep Fields and, some fine orchestras. So.
Oh, and what was it in Korea where he was on...
Yeah.
He was a gunner
band
turned
leader,
band.
Know why?
Yeah.
Because he could play 2 notes on a clarinet. And when I say 2, that was it. See, he was not a clarinetist. But I said, okay, you're going to be the band leader. And he was the band leader, yeah.
Yeah. Now,
but he knew enough of music, Ralph, and I had the sense, the stage sense that this man had, that what we got together was so obvious.
And Ralph had a good ear.
Like I said, he didn't come out from under a rock, neither did I, so we knew what we were doing.
But what a lot of people don't know is that Ralph could not read music.
No, Frank Sinatra couldn't read music.
Yep. So it wasn't necessary.
Well, those people had a knack to learn, to work with the piano player, hear the tune, and absorb it, and reproduce it.
Didn't Ralph have a job at one time in New York? He was recording new songs.
What he did, Ralph, was making proof records. For example, he was always surrounded by songwriters, Ralph, and had a lot of friends amongst the big, fantastic songwriters in New York at the time.
Oh, and that's a whole story in itself.
Whether it was
songwriters,
Irving Berlin or all those people, Lerner Lowe, you name them. Ralph had the experience. I had the experience. As we started sitting together in the dressing room between changes of being Napoleon or not, at that time also there was a young kid that came into our dressing room. I don't know if I ever told you that. There was a young kid that came in, and he was a very nice, quiet guy. And you know who that was?
No, who was that?
Elvis Presley.
Oh my.
And Elvis Presley would sit in our dressing room, Ralph and mine, waiting till the show was over because he had his eye on one of the French dancers. That's amazing, isn't it? And it was a little before his, he became so fantastically famous, Elvis, and died at 42, which is a tragedy. Let's think about it.
Yeah.
But
so you saw him.
So Ralph
rise.
and I are in our dressing room. I played the guitar. I sang a little ditty. Ralph sang a little ditty. And I quickly recognized that those two voices, two different sounds, a baritone cantabile, me, and a bass baritone, that those voices blend. I could blend to perfection with this guy. And that's what enticed me to say, wow, maybe we have something.
Blossoms in the on daily to where we lying in the hay,
chantonne la belle,
on our backs we lay,
ils ne sont pas méchants,
while the rounds were sung
avec les enfants.
only yesterday.
Ont le cœur fidèle.
Was
On top of that, I came from Europe, Ralph from America, two opposites, different performers actually, totally,
Yes.
in style and everything.
Yeah, and that's actually what became
So
your
that's
shtick.
what's so incongruous that this actually fit, and that when we built the act, Ralph and I, which we did solo, with the humor and everything, that it took to the American populace.
It did, yeah.
That was actually, the people in the know in the business said, "This is not going to work, guys. What are you talking about? This is not going to work." But it worked.
It worked,
but the story, it wasn't easy, Myrna, because I was actually thinking. I was walking Fifth Avenue with Ralph one night in New York. I said, "Ralph, I have to go back. This is not working." I was so close, so enormously close to leaving. My family would have never known America.
Right.
Some of my family that came to America would have never been here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think of that one small little decision.
Yeah.
Isn't that just amazing?
Yeah, it is.
And there's
truly is.
no one prouder than me being an American citizen. You know that.
Well,
anyhow.
we're glad to have you here. We certainly are. Tony, this is a good place to pause. We have a lot more stories to tell in episodes to come. If you want more information, go to our website, sandlerandyoung-legacy.com, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Our day will come.
The Tony Sandler Podcast. This was a TSLS production, edited by Digital Legend Media, Minneapolis. To explore Tony's legacy series, go to sandlerandyoung-legacy.com.